Hey guys, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you everything that I read and watched in the month of November. I had a fairly decent reading month in November. I participated in a readathon, the Fall into Fantasy readathon hosted by Penguin Teen. I read a total of 5 books. One of them was an audiobook, and then I had started a 6th book, but I ended up DNFing that one. So 5 books in completion for November. So I started off my month in November with a reread, and I picked up Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 2nd book in the Throne of Glass series. I'm currently rereading these books in preparation for Kingdom of Ash, which came out at the end of October, and I still have not gotten to yet because I'm slowly making my way through a reread of the series first. When I first read the series, this was my favorite book before I had read Queen of Shadows, which is now my favorite book. So I was going into it with pretty high expectations. It is the book where Selena and Kale kind of get their moment, and I was such a freaking Kale shipper. Then upon my reread, a lot of the conflicts in their relationship between who she is as a person versus who he is as a person were glaringly obvious in this book. The storyline that gets talked about a lot as the series progresses, and it kind of all begins in this book, and it's just so much more obvious on the reread that, like, even though I loved them together, there were so many issues between them and it was never going to work out. I'm not going to talk too much about it because it is a reread and I have an entire book talk on it, so if you want to watch my book talk, I will link it on the screen up here. But on my reread, I still gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because I still really freaking enjoyed it. The next book that I picked up in November was another reread for me. I enjoyed Crown of Midnight so much that I'm like, I need to read more of this story. I immediately went into Airfire by Sarah J. Maas, which is the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series. I would have argued for a while that this is probably on my lower end of favorites for the Throne of Glass series. However, on this reread, I have fallen so deeply in love with Airfire. This book was such a turning point in the series. The pacing changes so dramatically. There are so many new characters introduced. There's a whole new land introduced. Selena travels away from her home country. It's just like such a departure from the first 2 books. I also remember very distinctly disliking the Manon chapters. And while Manon's storyline is not my favorite in this book, I'm sure you can guess which one is. I appreciated her storyline so much more this time around. This has quickly become one of my favorite books in the series. I cried so many times. Owen and Selena's relationship in this book is beautiful and just so dramatic and complex and heart-wrenching. This book is a really hard one to get through on your first read, but if you ever go back and reread it, I guarantee that your feelings and thoughts on it will significantly change. I obviously gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars as well, and I have a full book talk on the screen if you want to listen to that as well. So after that, I finished my audiobook, which was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a book series that I really had no interest in reading for a very long time, and then this year it just kind of like came over me that I needed to read these books. I needed to experience this world. I dove into the audiobook for the first book because I had heard so many comments on like the writing style and how it's kind of lyrical and description heavy, and I just thought it'd be something that would be really hard for me to get through visually reading because I have a hard time with very lyrical descriptive writing. I actually really enjoyed the audiobook. There's definitely a lot of like description, and you can still tell in the audiobook. I thought it was so atmospherically done in the audiobook. The way that the narrator, it's narrated by Will Patton, has this like pretentious, pompous East Coast sound to his voice. It just fit the story so perfectly, and it just fit the description so perfectly that I didn't really mind it as much. This is a series following a girl. Her name is Blue, and she's from a family of psychics. However, she herself is not a psychic. And then she comes into contact with these 4 boys who go to a local prep school. They are on this grandiose quest trying to find a Welsh king. I didn't quite love it as much as a lot of other people do. I found the storyline to be like super entertaining, and there was so much more to the story than like what most people say in a synopsis. I wasn't as like invested or obsessed with it as so many other people are. It's currently being produced as a TV show or in talks to be a TV show, and if it ever makes it to TV, I will definitely 100% watch it, and I do plan to continue. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished this month was Stray by Rachel Vincent. Follow this young woman. She is in her early 20s. She's a werecat, so she can transform into like a panther looking creature. There's like a whole political system involving these werecats. It's very, very sexist, and our main character Faith 100% challenges the sexism that's ingrained in her community. Like I was saying, we follow this early 20s-year-old named Faith, and she is on campus. She gets approached, it's a nice way of saying it, she gets attacked by this werecat that she does not know. He is not from her pride. He is what they call a stray, so his scent is very unique to like the strays in this world. And because of this attack, and there's also so many other attacks on the other female werecats, that her father forces her to come back home to their like estate, basically puts her under quarantine, and she wants really nothing to do with her family or the politics or to fulfill the roles that she's supposed to fulfill as a female werecat. And it just causes a whole slew of issues, and there's a whole slew of events that happens. It does take a while to like get into the meat of this story for sure. Like there's a lot of dawdling that happens to like establish relationships between the characters and relationships beyond that with like the political sides of things before the plot of the first book really kicks into gear. Faith is one of my favorite female protagonists. She is so progressive and just like, especially for the time that this book was written in like 2006, I think it was published. She is super progressive for 2006, and she's very much always challenging her societal norms, her family norms. She's spunky, she's sassy, she's independent, she stands up for herself. She's a great main character, and I'm definitely going to be continuing with this series. I ended up giving it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. The next 2 books were part of the Fall into Fantasy readathon that I participated in that was hosted by Penguin Teen. The first book being Sight Witch by Susan Dennard. So Sight Witch is a prequel novella to the Witchland series by Susan Dennard, so Truth Witch and Wind Witch. And in this one we are following Ryber, who's a character that you meet in Truth Witch, and she's a sight witch. So she has the ability to see into the future, see prophecies, see the different paths that people can take and how the different paths influence their final destination. She is living in a convent of sight witches, and then one day sight witches just start getting called into the mountain by their goddess at much higher volumes than normal, to the point where eventually Ryber becomes the only sight witch left. And then there's also like a past timeline in this novella as well, where you're learning about the very early sight witches. I thought it was a really fun novella prequel story. I liked the dual timelines and how there was like a mystery aspect to it. There also seemed to be like a lot of information, because it is a prequel, but it's meant to be read after Wind Witch, so obviously there's spoilers and stuff in here. And so I felt like I should have known a lot of the references and a lot of like the events that they were talking about in the book, but I couldn't recall them from the first 2 books. I had read them so long ago. So I feel like there were a lot of things that I was missing and that I wasn't like picking up on completely. I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more had I read it after I read Wind Witch, or if I had reread the first 2 and then read this one. But it has reignited my excitement for Blood Witch, which comes out in January. I ended up giving Sight Witch 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then the last book I have to talk about, the book that I DNF'd, was Force of a Thousand Lanterns by Julie C. Dow. I was very excited to read this. It is an Asian-inspired retelling of the Evil Queen from Snow White. Lots of good things in there that I should have really enjoyed. But this book is so boring. I DNF'd this book at 57%, and I felt like the plot of how she becomes the Evil Queen like really had not even started yet. There's so much set up with her and her aunt, our main character is Zaifeng, with her aunt in their village, and then how she leaves her village and travels to the Emperor's castle in the Imperial City, and like what happens on their journey and the people that they meet and blah blah blah. Journey stories are fun when there's detours and obstacles and things to overcome. Journey stories are not fun when it's literally just a journey story and you're reading page after page of them walking through a forest. And then we get to the Imperial City, and she's trying to infiltrate the castle so that she can become the Empress, because long story short, this main character, Zaifeng, possesses some kind of like magic that we don't really know a lot about, or at least you don't, by 57%. She's prophesized to become the empress. However, there is already an empress, and the emperor has like concubines. So there's like even other ladies who he's romantically involved with. So she's trying to take out the empress plus these concubines in order to take the crown. And like there wasn't enough things happening halfway through the book. The ending must be so explosive and be so action-packed and have so much happening to like achieve all the things that she wants to achieve. I've just decided to DNF this book for the time being. This is something that I think I could come back to in the future. So those are all the books that I read in the month of November. Let's talk about the one episode of TV that I watched. So this month I watched exactly one episode of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is on Netflix. I watched the first episode. Things happened and I didn't continue. It wasn't because I didn't enjoy it. I actually quite enjoyed it. I thought it was creepy, a little unsettling. Had definitely the same like flavor and feeling of Riverdale, but I felt like this was a little bit creepier than Riverdale. It's definitely not the Sabrina of my childhood, but I did really enjoy it. I actually don't remember a whole lot about it because I only watched one episode, but I do remember like being entertained. I definitely do want to continue with the series. Really can't formulate any opinions on it as a whole. I watched exactly one episode of it, but it was a good episode. I liked it. I had a good time. So let's go ahead and talk about the movies. Much like the TV, I didn't really see any movies in November either. I did watch one Netflix original film, and that was A Christmas Prince, The Royal Wedding. I also watched A Christmas Prince, which is the first one. I thought I had watched the movie in its entirety last year when it came out. I went to go rewatch it this year to prepare for the sequel, and I definitely did not watch the whole thing last year. This is like one of those really cheesy Lifetime Hallmark movies. I mean, it's got like terrible set design, terrible hair and makeup, terrible costumes, terrible dialogue, terrible acting, but it was still very enjoyable. The same way that like a Lifetime Hallmark movie is still very enjoyable. I liked it. It was fun. I don't really have many opinions about it. It's cheesy. Then I watched the sequel, A Christmas Prince, The Royal Wedding, and it was equally as cheesy. I don't think I liked the sequel as much as the first one. I think I preferred the first one. I quite enjoyed them. Oh, I do want to talk very briefly about one Hallmark movie that I watched that I actually thought was above Hallmark standards, and that was It's Christmas Eve, starring LeAnn Rimes. This was actually one of the best Hallmark movies I've ever watched. I thought that the acting was really good, the storyline was really good, I thought that the dialogue was really good, like I really liked the set designs and the costumes, and people like looked well put together. Sometimes in Hallmark movies I'm like, did you brush your hair? It's about this woman named Eve. She is an interim superintendent, and she goes back to her hometown to step into the superintendent role to help that school district cut funds, rebudget ties, you know what I'm trying to say. She ends up forming a relationship with her parents' next door neighbor, who happens to be the school's music teacher, and she wants to cut his program. It was just such a good time. This is a Hallmark movie that you should actually like seek out and watch, because I actually really enjoyed it. LeAnn Rimes sings in it, obviously, because it's LeAnn Rimes, but I really enjoyed this one. So that is it. Those are all of the books, TV shows, and movies that I watched and read in the month of November. I would love to know what you guys did in November. Tell me in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you very soon. Bye!